I have yet to visit a mound site in Mississippi or Alabama where I did not find honey locust trees growing on or around the mounds. There's one mound here in Mississippi called Ingomar Mound that is completely surrounded by them. And if you're familiar with the trees, they produce these clusters of enormous, just formidable thorns that can grow up to a foot long. And it makes you wonder, did it also serve as a kind of fortress to keep people out of the mounds from trying to get into them? Because they are vicious thorns on these trees.
That's fascinating.
And
Darren,
psychedelic?
Say that again?
And they have psychedelic properties?
Yes, and the root bark. And that's another reason I think this hasn't been picked up by mainstream archaeologists and historians, because there are no scientific studies on it, no journals discussing it. It only occurs, to my knowledge, in one source, and that source is not an academic source. It's a psychedelic source. It's a man that called himself Keeper of the Trout. And once they found that acacia was possessed of DMT, he took it upon himself to start testing other trees that were closely related, like mimosa and honey locust. That these all usually have thorns and the same bipinnate compound leaf structure. And so he was visually finding these apparently related species and then testing them. And sure enough, he found that within the roots of honey locust was NN-DMT. The honey itself, that is the mad honey, in Turkey they call it deli bal. It just looks like honey. And you like traditionally in natural, they'll use it in a natural medicinal context, in addition to using it to get intoxicated. Men in particular will stir it into their morning tea or coffee and drink it to give them a little vigor for the day. It's also used to treat impotence in those same cultures. It's even been used in warfare, where it was given to the opposing party and to get them intoxicated. There's a famous story. If you look up intoxicating honey and warfare, I'm sure you'll find it. But if you take enough of it, it absolutely wipes you out. You can't walk, you can't see straight, you're spinning. Causes a tingling kind of feeling all over your body. For a long time, they thought that they weren't being used. But the first people to enter this research domain to really change people's minds on this were Albert Hoffman, the man who discovered the hallucinogenic effects of LSD, along with Carl A.P. Ruck, who is a classicist, and R. Gordon Wasson, who is the father of ethnomycology, of the use of mushrooms, not as intoxicants, but all kinds of mushrooms. He and his wife, Valentina, were just fascinated, verging on obsessed with the use of mushrooms, because he had a theory that some cultures are mycophobic, and those cultures, it doesn't matter if they're edible mushrooms, if they're intoxicating mushrooms, they're all treated as though they're poisonous. Until my son, for example, who loves foraging mushrooms, we do every year, but until he was old enough to distinguish them, I told him the same thing. Don't touch them, because there are some that will kill you if you consume them. And there's even one that you don't even have to consume it. It doesn't grow here. I think it's limited to Japan. But just touching it, the literature says it can shrink your brain. So there's some very dangerous components to fungi. But Wasson was fascinated by these these two approaches, the mycophobic and the mycophilic. The first thing that really pointed their laser at was the Eleusinian mysteries, where a substance was drunk called kiki. I took a step back because I had no real frame of reference for what I was experiencing. And I thought, I need to find kind of a guide, or at least a tradition that I can get involved with that might have something that I can, use to make sense of what I was experiencing on DMT. But the experiences were ego death, what's classically described as ego death, encounter with apparently intelligent entities, the classic DMT stuff.